Hello, I'm Sarah. This is Hardcover Hearts, and this is my week of reading wrap-up, where I talk about the books that I read, what I'm currently reading, and then what could I potentially read next week based on my mood. I had a very great reading week, and a lot of the books that I'm kind of in progress with, but finished 4 really good books that all happen to be from my NetGalley backlog. So I'm quite pleased with myself. So let's get started, and I'll tell you all about them. The first thing that I completed was Waking Lions, and this is by Ayelet Gundar-Goshen, and this is translated by Sondra Silverston. This is a really, really interesting book. Set in modern-day Israel, we've got a doctor, very haughty, obnoxious, overly confident doctor who has been kind of banished for being too much of a know-it-all and smartass into kind of a more remote hospital. He pulls a shift that's really, really long, and against advice from his colleagues, decides he's going to drive home. On his drive, he ends up accidentally hitting an Eritrean man. He gets out of his car and he goes and he looks at what he hit and realizes that he hit a person. He does immediately look at the body, look at the man, make his assessments, and the doctor's a neurologist. And from what he can tell, he knows that there is no hope for this man to survive. And so he, in his haughtiness, in his self-centeredness, decides that because that man is going to die anyway, he should just leave the scene and protect himself and his wife and his children and right? So he leaves him. He abandons this man, leaves him on the ground suffering to eventually die. He goes home and starts his rationale, does all of this thinking in his head, and ends up having a very good night's sleep. The next morning, his wife takes the children and they go off to school, and the doorbell rings. Now, he is convinced that he has covered up everything, that there's no trace, everything's fine. A woman is standing there, an Eritrean woman, and she asks for him by name, and immediately he knows he's been found out. But he can't figure out how. He doesn't know what happened. How does she know? And she holds up his wallet. At that moment, some of his neighbors start coming home, and so he doesn't want to be seen speaking with her. So they make arrangements to speak later at an abandoned warehouse. He proceeds to go in and get a bunch of money, thinking he's going to pay her off. But she doesn't want money. She wants his service, and she wants his time. And she wants him to treat the immigrant community that lives in this area. And there starts this very, very, very complex story of motivations and immigrant lives and goodness, ethics, all of those things. It's very complex. Now, this story goes in a lot of different places. There were many times where I thought it was going to become a little trite or too predictable, but it did deviate to the point where some of the things that happened in it I felt were stretching credulity. But I think this would be an unbelievable book club book because there's so much to talk about. There's no good and bad here. It's all these set of grays. So it was, I wish the plot was a little bit tighter and there weren't so many introductions of things and twists and turns, but it was an enjoyable read. And I'm very glad I finally got to it from my NetGalley bunch. So there you go. The next up was something that I was so hoping that I was going to get picked for. And this is The Secret of Beau Lane by Jennifer Ashley. Now, I've spoken about the series before. This is the Kate Holloway series. I think this is the 6th one. And this is set in Edwardian London. And we have Cat Holloway. Cat Holloway, really interesting character. She works as the head of the kitchen. She's, in essence, the head cook for this manor home in London. I think it would be called a manor home, but it's aristocrat's home, and she runs the kitchen. The series is very specific about the types of food that's served, how it's prepared, what she has to do as a cook during this time to get everything, line everything up, how many times she needs to serve, what all the rules are for this type of role in a home like this in Edwardian London. So that in and of itself is interesting. And then we have the fact that she is just always willing to help people out. And she knows so many people because as a cook, she's interacting with others at market and the like, and just ends up meeting a lot of people. So she and this man, Daniel, have helped each other in solving some crimes and solving some mysteries along the way. And she is settled in. She's befriended one of the women who live in this home. It's like kind of the niece of the aristocracy that she works for. So this story opens up with Kat being confronted by a woman that she knows of, but she wasn't sure the woman knew of her. This woman was the wife of the man that she actually thought she was married to. So her husband turned out to be a bigamist, and Kat only found out upon his death at sea. This woman approaches Kat and is desperate for her help, but at the same time super contemptuous of her and looks down on her and judges her. But she knows that Kat solves things and is a very helpful person. So she basically breaks it to her that their husband, Joe, did not die at sea like Kat always thought, but instead was murdered a few years later. And apparently he had a lot of money. He had come into a lot of money. And if Kat would help her find it, she would get some of it. So it starts this really interesting mystery for Kat to solve, but it also comes at a really hard point because she's starting to develop feelings for this one man, and now all of the memories of this horrible man who lied and cheated and made her believe something that wasn't true have been stirred up. As I said, I really love the series. I always look forward to it. So I was delighted to read it. And this one will be coming out very, very soon. I'll put the information below in the description box. Then a book that just came out. This is Dirtbag Massachusetts by Isaac Fitzgerald. Now, this is kind of everywhere. It's getting a big blitz. Isaac Fitzgerald, I heard of because he's BFFs with Said Jones, the writer and poet. And their friendship just looks really great. And so I was interested to get my hands on a copy, put it in, and got approved by NetGalley. So it's written in vignette-style essays, and I will say the first part of it is incredibly compelling. He opens with a bang that he is the product of an affair from both parents. So both his parents were married to other people when he was born. They both left their marriages and started a family together with him at the center. But it was a very difficult family life of incredible poverty. And he kind of talks about his life in nonlinear form in kind of these really short vignette kind of anecdotal little stories. I think in some places the writing was really, really good. Like I said, it really opens strong. He moves around. We see him moving from Boston to out into the country with his family, moving to San Francisco. And ironically, he lived in San Francisco when I had moved across the country, but he lived in the neighborhoods that I lived in. And I know exactly some of the places that he mentions in this book. So it was very interesting to kind of see it through his eyes in a time when I was not here. So he's kind of someone who has a big heart, but also gets himself into a lot of damage, destruction, and he loves a bar. This is a boozy memoir, and so he talks a lot about bar culture, bar life, the attraction to him of bars, and it has that kind of alcoholic joy and glee that I, being someone who has been sober for many decades, I get it. I really do, but I don't want to spend that much time with that type of content. So for me, I liked hearing some of these stories, and I liked fundamentally his writing style, and I liked learning more about him, but I don't think this really worked that much for me. It's an okay memoir. I will be very interested to see what other people make of it as more reviews start coming in. Then I broke one of my most cardinal rules. So some of you who watch this channel may be very surprised. I read something out of series order, and I was so nervous about it too, because I love reading a series and growing with characters and watching how the author takes a character through the full arc of their journeys and relationships and pivots that they need to make in their life. So to go into this, I did read the first one before and enjoyed it. This is number 10. This is Where There's a Will. This is the 10th of the Rowland Sinclair mystery series, and this is by Sulari Gentill. This is a series that is set in the 1930s in Australia. And I love the Australian point of view on the events that are happening in the world that are going to lead into World War II. It's an interesting perspective, different. They see things that and it's told in a way, it's all the same stories told in a different point of view. So in this series, we have Rowland Sinclair, and he is kind of like Lord Peter Wimsey without the title. He's very rich, but he himself is an artist. But because of his wealth, he has access and entree to a lot of different places, and he has been pulled into some mysteries. He has a set of 3 friends, 2 male and 1 female, that are also artists. There's a poet, another visual artist, and a woman sculptor named Edna. And they are in Shanghai when they receive news that he's been called to Boston because a very good friend of his, one of his very best friends from Oxford, has died and has basically stated that he wants Rowland to be the executor of his estate. So they have to leave immediately in order to make sure that the body is buried in time and to find out what's going on with this estate and to mourn their friend. While they're there, they find out about the will, and the will has created some real tricky situation for Rowland coming into this and meeting the family and finding out that everything has been left to a man that nobody knows who he is. There's a gay element to this in that his friend Danny, the person who has died, used to be in love with Rowland, and they were both artists together, and they had moved past it, but there's obviously still a deep respect and love that they had for each other. So I don't want to tell too much more other than it was just loads of fun. What I really like about what Gentill does is at the beginning of every chapter, she kind of tees it up with a article from a paper all across the United States, which kind of sets the tone for what to expect within that chapter. And I just thought that was so smart. And because Rowland Sinclair is filthy, filthy wealthy, he has entree and meets with and knows and has connections of other wealthy people. And so you get all sorts of kind of cameos from people in history that show up in these books. A ton of fun. I really liked it. I liked the relationships between everyone in this. And I can't wait to go back and kind of catch myself back up with the other 8 that I haven't read in this series. So really excited to do that. Okay, so that's what I finished. Let me tell you what I'm currently reading, because my God, it's amazing. Okay, where to start? I'm reading this with Eric Carl Anderson. This is The Country Girls. This is the trilogy. So we have The Country Girls is the first one. The Lonely Girls is the second. And Girls in Their Married Bliss is the third. I said that I was loving this so far. Oh, it got even better. The writing is so smooth and it reads so quickly, but you want to slow down because it's so good. The relationships between Baba and Kate are fantastic. Just truly intimate girl friendships of girls who grew up with each other and kind of like sisters almost. But have a little bit of a rivalry, this love-hate thing, but at the same time, they're there for each other and they really support each other. I adore it. I finished The Country Girls and was absolutely in love with it. There's so much youthful exuberance and this town is so weird. This little village is so weird. And you just really see how these young girls were always people were always watching them and wanted something from them. And it feels a little fraught, but these women are plucky and smart and funny. There's just every kind of emotion in here. I'm absolutely loving it. I just finished The Lonely Girls, so I don't want to say too much about it because I left the last check-in with Eric, so I want him to be able to listen to that. But fantastic. I'll do a full talk about this when I finish it, which might be next week. Then I'm continuing with The Sun King. This is by Nancy Mitford. And this is so funny. I just wanted to read one little bit because she puts these things in here and I had to laugh because it sounds like someone we know. This is the 3rd chapter. They had a way of talking which has unfortunately never been precisely described, but which people found irresistible. Their lazy, languishing, wailing voices would build up an episode, piling unexpected exaggerations upon comic images until the listeners were helpless with laughter. Among themselves, they used a private language. They were malicious but good-natured. They never really harmed anybody. They liked laughing and had the precious gift of making other people sparkle. I would say that it speaks very much about her and her sisters. So I'm going to see if I can put a clip. I'm going to look for a clip of the Mitfords, an interview, and you could see what I mean. They had a very distinctive way of talking. So the irony there. There's no way she doesn't know that little tongue-in-cheek there. Still absolutely in love with this book. Let the Record Show, Political History of ACT UP New York, 1987 to 1993 by Sarah Schulman. This is just, there's so much to think about and there's so much to say about this book. I think I'm about 1/3 of the way done. I think the hardest bit is the first bit to kind of get through and then you kind of figure out how she is putting this together. Which is I'm really in love with the formatting, how she's bringing all of these pieces together. And the repetition, but from different angles, allows you to get some of these concepts of how they ACT UP was formed. If you don't know, ACT UP is a activist group of individuals, many of whom had HIV, but they were members of primarily of the gay community, who were incredibly instrumental in fighting for their lives and getting changes to the FTC, getting changes from pharmaceutical companies to get access to trials, to get access to drugs, to lower the prices of drugs so that we could eventually arrive where we are today, where AIDS isn't a death sentence and people have the medicines to actually live. Fundamentally important, such an important organization. And the book just is phenomenal. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, my God, this is a great book. And I'm glad we're reading it slowly. I think there's like 3 more weeks. And so I'm excited by that. Then for my In Real Life book club, I'm reading The Promise by Damon Galgut. Ooh. So I was raised in Mozambique from like the late 70s to early 80s. This is set in 1987. But we used to have to go into South Africa for also, all sorts of different things, because Mozambique at that time was a third world country. South Africa was a second world country. So medicines and groceries and things like that. And it is a lot to read this because there's so many cultural things that are immediately thrown out there. This is a story of a family where the mother has just died of a very long illness. And she has made a promise to their Black maid who lives with them. This is during apartheid South Africa. And she's made a promise that the home that woman lives in is going to be given to her, that she'll be able to own that home. And she extols and makes sure that her husband agrees to it. And he promises her before she dies that he will honor that. And his daughter heard. So that's what sets this off. I'm also about a third of the way through this. I meet with my In Real Life book club next weekend, so I'll be done next week with this. But already I can see how it could win the Booker, because it's so interesting. So interesting so far. And then I am also listening to Monica Ali's Love Marriage. I'm listening to this in audio, and it is much more complex than I thought. I thought it was going to be a light, frothy listen, but there is some drama, but drama and trauma kind of bubbling up. And it has a lot more gravitas than I expected, which is interesting. I am enjoying it, though I will say the audiobook, I do get confused because the narration sometimes doesn't necessarily change accents based on the characters. And so that can be a little confusing. So I think I'm enjoying it, but maybe I would have liked it a little more in written form. We'll see. I will be reviewing that next week because I'm almost done with that. And then for next week, I just want to continue reading through these. And yeah, we'll see what else excites me. And I definitely need to get on pull another NetGalley one, because that's been going very well for me. So that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. And I would love to know, have you read any of these? And if so, what did you think? Do you know any books like this that you think I would like? And most importantly, what do you think is going to be on the Booker long list that's going to be announced next week? I'm dying to know. And I think that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye.